you have each of those are so different from each other. So those are what we call focal presentation due to the local effects of the tumour around it. And the other way the tumour can affect and be presented is by doing global problems to the whole of the head, raise pressure inside the head. So either the tumour gets so large, or the tumour blocks off the fluid pathways and causes hydrocephalus, that thing that we spoke about last time.
Yes.
And then you get global pressure rising inside the head, headache, not able to sleep properly, vomiting a lot, irritability, especially in young children or babies who are pre-vocal. They just know that they're not right, and then they come along and have a scan, and then they get found to have a tumour. So those are global and focal ways that you can present with a tumour.
When a tumour is just pushing into the brain, if and it's causing this damage, it's causing these side effects or these effects, these repercussions. If you take it out, does the brain naturally just go back to how it was, or does that cause every time a permanent damage?
If you are managing to get the tumour out without damaging brain structures around it, you can leave them essentially without any problems afterwards.
So, horribly, the main risk when you remove a tumour is you damaging the tumour itself. Doesn't necessarily, it's just sort of pushing things, squeezing them up. If you take the tumour out, would the brain necessarily expand back to where it was?
Well, that kind of depends on what type of tumour it is.
Okay.
Again, tumour that comes from outside can push the brain, and you can remove it, and then the brain may be able to, re-expand back in.
Mm-hmm.
But in actual fact, many of our tumours are what we call, in children in particular, most of them are what we call intrinsic.
Mm-hmm.
So they're within the brain itself. So they're coming from the brain cells. Not necessarily the neurons, but they are brain cells. And so they're within the brain. So the issue will be how much brain tissue is within the tumour as opposed to tumour tissue within the tumour.
Mm-hmm.
And on the edges of the tumour, how much is the interface between tumour and brain well delineated, and how much is it slightly woolly with fingers being pushed in of the tumour into the brain itself.
So sorry, no, going back, which is the better part, which is the better version of the type of cells? The thing you just said, is it better to have the tumour cells or the brain cells?
It's better to have tumour without brain cells interspersed in them.
Right.
Because then we can try and take this lump out.
You can take this thing out. Okay, yes.
Without taking... what we can't do is we can't operate down to the cellular level. So we can't go in and take these cells out and leave those other cells that are in between them alone. Chemotherapy may be able to do that in some tumours, but when you're doing the operation, you're really looking at a very gross way of saying, this area contains abnormality, I'm going to take it out. So if you have tumours, and there's one type of tumour known as a DIPG, a diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. That's the posh title for it. And that's a tumour that grows within the middle part of the brain that deals with blood pressure, heart rate, and conscious level. And those tumours, the tumour itself is going hand in glove with the brain cells. So the tumour cells weave their way through the brain cells. And so you get this gross swelling of the pons, but it's not here's tumour and here is pons, it's all one mixture. So once you do that, you can't operate and take out the tumour because you're taking out all of that brain as well. And that's so important for life that you simply can't do it. So those sorts of tumours are really tumours that you can't do big resection surgery on. Whereas if you have a child with a tumour that's mostly tumour cells within it, and then it comes up to the border with the brain, then you know you can core out the centre of this tumour and take it out, and it's all good. Then the next question will be what the boundary between the tumour and the brain is like. If it's a very good boundary, as in here's brain, here is tumour, and they're lying next to each other but not infiltrating or stuck to each other at all, then other than the brain vessels that will be coming in to feed the tumour, which we need to take, we can then, having, for example, cored out the centre, we can then work our way around the boundary and then remove all of that tumour. However, if on the edges of the tumour it's more like a group of fingers of tumour pushing into the brain, then even if you haven't got nerve by tumour by nerve by tumour like you have with the DIPG, you still have these fingers, and then counteracted by fingers of brain cells in between them. So if you lock your fingers together, and you look at them and you think, well, some of those from the left hand are going to be tumour, some of them from the right hand are going to be brain. But when I'm operating, I have to decide this. Do I cut off at my left knuckle, in which case I'm leaving those fingers of tumour behind? Or do I cut off on my right knuckles, in which case I'm taking all the tumour, but I'm taking those bits of brain as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But when you like take the top off and you look in, what does a tumour look like? How would you describe? You know, because I think we know what a brain looks like, but we might not have a real idea. But can you tell with the naked eye what a tumour looks like?
If it's coming up to the surface, yes, you often can. Yeah.
So like a brain, I imagine, is some sort of grey cabbage. But what does a tumour? Is it just darker, like a blacker?
Right. So again, the answer to everything is it all is very variable. There are some tumours, often the low-grade ones, the benignish ones, that have been growing very slowly, and because they grow very slowly, they can often get a level of maturity within the cells. The cells move along from their very basic type to getting a level of maturity where it starts to look like brain. And so there it can be very hard to tell the difference between the brain tumour and the brain itself. On the flip side, very aggressive tumours that are growing very rapidly, they don't have a chance to start to mature before they're replicating. So the cells within it are often quite an immature level of cell anatomy, and they don't tend to be able to build the infrastructure within their city like a slow-growing city can. So slow-growing tumour, it's like a slow-growing city, it gets to build the structures of the roads, of the buildings in there, so it can look like another city. So a tumour can look like the brain around it.
When you're, if you can't tell what it looks like when you operate, how can you remove it? Do you follow? Is it an X-ray or an MRI scan that tells you?
Yeah. So there are different ways. The first is obviously using your anatomical knowledge. So you know from the scan.
You know that other city shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and you say, well, hang on a minute. If you imagine the surface of the brain is like the walnut, it's got a rippled surface.
Yeah.
And we know from our anatomical knowledge what those ripples should look like and where those ripples should be.
Yeah.
If they're distorted, you can follow that and say, they're being distorted by this tumour in this location.
Okay, so you can't necessarily see the tumour, but you see the result of it. You can follow it back.
Yeah, exactly. Then you can follow it down, and you're using the scan to tell you, I need to go slightly in front of this blood vessel, and then follow it, go 20 degrees this way.
So you use the scan like a map or a sat-nav sort of thing?
So we sometimes just use the scan like a sat-nav for simple ones. And for more complex ones or difficult ones, we actually use